So our type 1 and type 2 errors occur during a hypothesis test because we don't know if HO is true or false. Now when HO is true and we fail to reject it, that's a correct decision. That's great. If H naught is false and we reject it, again, that's a correct decision. So that leaves us with two other possibilities, two other errors. A type 1 error is rejecting H naught when it's true. Type 2 error is failing to reject H naught when it's false. So, wow, a lot going on. Let's practice this. I kind of like the fact that when they're doing this on my stat lab, that you kind of get a little bit of a crutch. So let's take a look at what that crutch is. Come on, there we go. It says identify the type 1 and type 2 error that corresponds to the given hypothesis. So first things first, let's actually write down what this original claim is and then set up a null and alternative hypothesis based on that. So call this example I. And the claim is that P equals 0.27. That is 27% of people write with their left hand. So, okay, let's put that in a null and alternative hypothesis setup. HO, HA. Where is this claim going to go? In HO or HA? It's going to go in HO. Good, because it contains a possibility of equality. 0.27. What does that put in the alternative hypothesis? Good, it's a not equal to. So, not equal to 0.27. And we're going to start with a type 1 error. So, type 1 error. And for that, let's think through a little bit first. In a type 1 error, what's the status of H naught? Is H naught true or false if you're making a type 1 error? And you can look back at your notes. Try and decide what's actually the case with H naught if you're making a type 1 error. True. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by stating what's true, and then I'm going to state my decision compared to what's true. So this is true. So let's state that. Type 1 error is going to be, it is true that 27% of people write with their left hands. So that's what's true. The second part of that is to state our decision. Well, our decision wasn't to accept this, wasn't to fail to reject it because we made an error. So our decision was that we rejected that claim. So, but the data rejected that claim. So we conclude that the alternative is true. We concluded something different is what happened on that one. So it's tough. There's two things I want you to state when you're stating these kinds of type 1 and type 2 errors in words. I want you to tell me what the status of H naught is, and I want you to tell me what your decision was compared to H naught. Okay. Let's see. Let me go back here. Now let's take a look at what your choices will be on my stat lab. And I guess if you're playing the odds as a student, and I don't blame you for doing so, it says which of the following is a type 1 error? And it says reject the claim that this, fail to reject, reject the claim, fail to reject. There's two of these that you can get rid of right away. It's either the ones that begin with reject the claim or fail to reject the claim. Which ones can I get rid of? Fail to reject. Yeah, I want to get rid of this one and this one because when you make a type 1 error, you're rejecting H naught. So the conclusion of that, or writing it up in words, shouldn't start out with we fail to reject the claim. So we can get rid of those two right away. Then the next part of it has to be the sentence talking about, well, what was our decision? I mean, how did our decision compare to what's true? So let's take a look here. Reject the claim that the proportion of the people who write with their left hands is 0.27 when in fact, or when the proportion is actually 0.27. So that's this part right here. That's kind of sounding like what happened, right? Let's compare it to the other one, just to make sure. So when we compare it to the other one, it says, reject the claim that the proportion of people who write with their left hand is 0.27 when the proportion is actually different than 0.27. Well, that's not right, because that would be a correct decision if we rejected it when it's different than 0.27. So the correct answer for us in this case would be A. You reject the claim that the proportion of people who write with their left hand is 0.27 when the proportion is actually 0.27. That's describing a type 1 error. I'll be honest with you things. These things are as tough on me as they are on you, because grading them makes my head hurt. It really does. I have to budget extra time when I have to grade this problem because it just takes so long. You have to sort through and go, is that right? Is that what it's saying? So anyways, I feel your pain. Let's work on a type 2 error. Which of the following is a type 2 error? So let's go back and revisit the problem a little bit and think about what a type 2 error is going to be. And let me go here. So I'm going to go back to the claim. I'm just going to go here. H naught and HA. So in this case, P is 0.27 and P equals or not equal to 0.27. Okay. Now let's circle H naught again. If we're making a type 1 error, what's the status of type 2 error? If we're making a type 2 error, what's the status of H naught? Is it true or is it false? False. Good. H naught is false. But then what? H naught is false, but we failed to reject it. We screwed up again. All right. So we need to state that in words. And it's just not always very easy to do. We can start out by, again, discussing what's true about H naught, or true or not true about H naught. We can discuss the status of H naught. So in words, the claim that 27% of people are lefties is false. So that's telling me about the status of H naught. H naught is false. Now I need you to tell me about the decision. What do we decide given that H naught is false? What was our decision? Did we fail to reject or reject? We failed to reject. We failed to reject. Good. So that's a wrong decision. We should be rejecting that claim, but we didn't. And because we failed to reject it, that's our type 2 error. So, but the data failed to reject that claim. So there you go. That's a type 1. That's a type 2 error in words. Now, when I give these problems on an exam, quite often I will literally give you the definition of a type 1 and type 2 error. So you don't have to worry about screwing those up. Now, it's not quite as altruistic as it sounds. The reason I do that is because when I ask people for a type 1 and type 2 error in words that relate to the problem, they give me a definition. And so I'm just going to point back and say, look, I gave you the definition. You're not getting points for giving me the definition. I need it in words. I want you to realize what are the consequences of an error. What are those errors in words? So that's what you can expect from me on the exam. You can expect the definition to be given to you. Now, I may not give you this table filled in like this, but likely I'll give you something like this. What a type 1 and type 2 error are. So you can fill in the table as you like, depending if you need to or not. It's up to you. Let's try another one. Actually, you know what? Let's go through and look at our choices that you're going to see on my stat lab. So which of the following is a type 2 error? Well, again, I think I would start out with what our decision was. Did we reject or fail to reject if you're making a type 2 error? We failed to reject. So that means I can get rid of C and D. Why is it doing this to me again? So let's get rid of those two, because our error was that we failed to reject. We should have rejected, but we failed to reject. So it's one of these two. Fail to reject the claim the proportion of people who write with their left hand is 0.27 when the proportion is actually different than 0.27. Well, that sounds okay. Let's compare it to the other one. Fail to reject a claim that the proportion of people who write with their left hand is 0.27 when the proportion is actually 0.27. Well, this would kind of imply that H0 is true. So if H0 was true, we shouldn't be rejecting. So that one's not the right one. The right one is A. Fail to reject the claim that the proportion of people who write with their left hand is 0.27. So fail to reject H0 when the proportion is actually different than 0.27. And that last part is saying, well, really HA is what's true. Let's try another one. The percentage of households with internet access is less than 60%. Identify the type 1 error and choose the correct answer below. So we'll call this example J. And the original claim here, let's see, percentage of households with internet access is less than 60%. What parameter am I testing there? Proportion, good. So the original claim is that P is less than 0.60. HO and HA. Into which hypothesis is this going to go? HO or HA? Yeah, this does not have the possibility of equality. There's no equal to here in any way, shape, or form. So P is less than 0.60. And that puts P is greater than 0.60. Greater than or equal to, I should say. Although, what are they going to put in my stat lab? Instead of this, they're going to put P equals 0.60, which is okay. I'm just being a little bit more user-friendly for you guys. Let's work on a type 1 error. Oops, type 1 error. Now, in a type 1 error, again, we want to go back and think about, well, what's true or what's false about HO. If you're making a type 1 error, what's the status of HO?
HO was true, but you rejected it.
Yeah. HO is true, but we rejected it. So let's look back and see what exactly that 60% referred to again. 60% of households have internet access, or so it's a percentage of households that have internet access. So I'll start out kind of like I did with the last one. It is true that, and I'm just going to describe this in words. So in words, that at least 60% of households have internet access. At least 60% of households have internet access. So that's what's true about H naught. Now we need to discuss our decision. So what was our decision? Even though this is true, what do we do with H naught? Did we fail to reject or reject? All right. Got a couple people that say reject. Yeah, if it's type 1 error, then you're rejecting this when it's true. So the last part of this is going to say that we rejected this claim. But the data rejected that claim. So I started out, I told you what H naught was, and then I told you my decision. What's going on with H naught is that it's true, but we rejected it. So that's an error. It's a type 1 error. All right, these are always good to silence the crowd. And I kind of feel that here a little bit. All right, almost done. Let's see if we can't do a type 2 error. So I'll keep going with this. Let's go back and do HO and HA again. You don't have to. P is greater than 0.60. P is less than 0.60. This is going to be our type 2 error. And again, let's look back at HO. If you're making a type 2 error, what's the status of H naught? Is it true or is it false? It's false. So we'll start out by talking about the status of this, and then we'll compare it to our decision. So there's those two parts to this process. So I can say it like this maybe. While it is not true that at least 60% of households have internet access. So right now, the first part of it is I'm just telling you what's true about H naught. And that is H naught is false. And you can state that in a lot of ways, and that's what makes this very difficult for me to grade, is that I really got to parse through and see what you're saying. But that's the first part, is you're telling me what's the status of H naught. Now we're going to compare that to our decision. This is false. But what was our decision? Yeah, but we failed to reject. But the data do not reject that claim. The data failed to reject that claim. Whew. Now you can look at the answers that they have on my stat lab. Let's see if we can't pick out the correct ones here. And a couple people keeping up with me on chat. Thank you for that. So let's see if we can't pick out the correct ones from this list on my stat lab. So identify the type 1 error. We'll start out the same way we did with the last one. If you're making a type 1 error, is your first move to reject or fail to reject? Yeah, you're going to be rejecting, right? So I can get rid of a couple of these. I can get rid of fail to reject and fail to reject. Because in a type 1 error, you're rejecting H naught. And the last part is to decide, well, which one of these basically says that H naught is true. Because in a type 1 error, you're rejecting a true H naught. Well, reject the null hypothesis that the percentage of households with internet access is equal to 60% when that percentage is actually equal to 60%. So is that saying H naught is true? That the percentage is equal to it, and we rejected that. That sounds pretty good. Let's take a look at the other one. Reject the null hypothesis that the percentage of households with internet access is less than 60% when that percentage is actually less than 60%. Well, this isn't the null hypothesis, right? If you look carefully at this, what is this statement? Less than 60%, that's the alternative hypothesis. And that's not a type 1 error. So the type 1 error is B. And finally, let's get down to a type 2 error. And again, start it this way. What decision are you making when you make a type 2 error? You fail to reject. H naught is false, but you failed to reject it. So if you're trying to play the odds and increase your chance of getting a problem right, I'd start out by nixing A and B. You're not rejecting anything with a type 2 error. Instead, you fail to reject. You fail to reject H naught even though it's false. So which one describes that? Well, fail to reject the null hypothesis that the percentage of households with internet access is equal to 60% when that percentage is actually less than 60%. Okay. Or fail to reject the null hypothesis that the percentage of households with internet access is less than 60% when the percentage is actually equal to 60%. Well, H naught is false. So this is saying that that's saying what the null hypothesis is when the percentage is actually less than 60%. What that second part of this is saying is that HA is really what is true. or the alternative is true, making the null hypothesis false. So let me just convince myself again that this is the right one. Fail to reject the null hypothesis. The percentage of households with internet access is equal to 60%. So this is fail to reject our H naught when HA is true. So that's our type 2 error right there for C. Okay. Comments or thoughts on that last one there? Just so you know, when I grade these things, I try and keep the points to these problems set kind of on the low side. I don't make them 10 or 15 point problem. I make them more like 4 points for the type 2 and type 2 errors because they're hard. I get it. So we did spend some time on this. You should expect to do something like this a week from today, but you know, practice makes perfect. All right. Yeah. Your homework's going to be a lot of fun. Good luck with all that.